Hello and good evening, everybody. We're back for another edition of Reasonable Doubt. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan, along with my co-host, Julio Velo. Julio, congrats, man. Big win today for you.
Hey, we take the wins when we can. We give a hook 'em and a go Cougs when it feels good. And we live to fight another day.
Sure do. We got a great show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We have the Democratic candidate for sheriff here in Harris County, Ed Gonzalez, with us tonight. Ed, thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
It's really good to have you on. We enjoy getting the candidates on here. We've had Kim Ogg on, and I'm sure we're going to get a couple of the judiciary candidates and everything on here over the next month. It's coming in. We're getting into the crunch time here. November's quickly approaching, so it's always good to have everybody on. But we're going to spend the next hour talking with Ed, ladies and gentlemen, about the upcoming election, his run for sheriff, a lot of the issues that are going on around Harris County. And we'll talk a little bit also about larger issues going on with policing across the country and get Ed's thoughts on that as well. We are going to have Twitter up all night at HCCLA_TV, so you can send us your questions and comments right there. You can also call in this evening. We'll open up the phone lines about 8:30 or so. We're not beholden to that, but if you want to go ahead and give a call in, 713-807-1794 is the number, and you can join in the conversation that way. Guys, we got a lot of debates in the air. First debate, presidential debate, was this week. We had the DA debate, which apparently turned into just a...
I missed it. I didn't even know what was going on.
Well, nobody did. It kind of got buried because of the presidential debate. But, we were talking before we got on the air, Ed, and I asked you if there was going to be a sheriff's debate, and apparently that got canceled, unfortunately. I would like to see that because I know you have some very strong feelings about how to turn this around and how to turn the jail around. I would like to start there because, frankly, I think that's such a monumental task. The Harris County Jail and the jailing process that we have currently set up, it just seems, it seems like that Star Destroyer in Star Wars. It keeps going and it gets so big and big and big and big. And as it's moving across the screen, how do you propose turning this thing around? At this point, it's like the Titanic. Are you going to be able to turn this thing around quickly if you get elected?
Yes, I feel very confident that I'll be able to get that done. I think the first thing is to be able to bring the budget back under control when we're spending 500% overtime increase. That's front and center what we have to do. We also have to bring the staffing levels back to what they should be. Right now we have over 200 openings, which is leading to that overtime cost. And it's pulling money from street patrols, which doesn't improve public safety.
And I'm kind of confused on the numbers because I have looked at the overtime budget increase, but I also know he's been cutting jail staff. Sheriff Hickman has. There's been cuts, but yet there's also been increases, and it seems like the increases have far outweighed the cuts that he's made, and it seems to be he's making cuts in the wrong places.
Correct, and also people are leaving. I've heard there's been an exodus of just people leaving to find other opportunities, or just morale is low because of being overworked and the policies that are in place. So it's going to have to really come in. I've said all along that I'm going to be a sheriff that's going to walk around the jail because you're right. It's the elephant in the room. It's what takes up a lot of time and resources. So I want to make sure that I'm paying attention, management by walking around, making sure that the detention officers know that I care, that I'm paying attention, as well as the inmates as well, that they know that the sheriff has an eye on the operation, and we're going to make sure that things are done correctly. Can't be there all the time, but definitely walk on a more regular basis. And I'll welcome the media to come in there as well and keep an eye on the operation.
Mr. Gonzalez, what makes you qualified to be sheriff at one of the biggest and most complex counties in the state, but also in the country?
Yes, well, I've been a veteran police officer. I worked a lot of murder investigations. I know how to work those complex investigations. I was also selected to be a member of the hostage negotiation team, which is a very elite team within HPD, very difficult to get in. They usually select every 10 years. So I have that experience with very specialized, high-level training. I promoted to the rank of sergeant, which is a management position with HPD. So I know how to lead, the troops, if you will. And I also use that experience to then serve on Houston City Council in a public policy position as chair of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee, creating policy that helped improve public safety. For example, I was a chief architect for the Houston Sobering Center that I'm very proud of, as well as other mental health policy that's still in existence today in terms of a more humane way and a more effective way of dealing with those that have mental illness. And that's an important piece of the Sheriff's Office because we've become a de facto mental state hospital.
I've heard of the Sober Center. What is that, though?
Yes, what we found is that we were arresting about 15,000 people per year for public intoxication. And it was very costly and frankly ineffective. So we went with more of a model where we take them, instead of an arrest, the officers have discretion to take them to the sobering center where basically they can sleep it off for a few hours, sober up. The officers could get back on patrol, crime fighting out in the communities, and at the same time that we're having more effective results with that population because we're dealing with the core issue. And that's something that too many times we're missing in law enforcement. I like to say that in law enforcement, we've steered in a different direction where we're trying to address certain things with a law enforcement response, and frankly, it doesn't have a law enforcement solution. That's addiction, mental illness, and poverty. And I think we need a different approach. I mean, there's a lot of hard criminals out there that we need to be going out there, the robbers, the people are burglarizing our homes, the sexual assaults, murders. Those are things we need to be paying attention to. We need more robust investigative divisions. They're depleted, and they're not effectively investigating the cases they have.
Well, aren't they really depleted because the sheriff's office has really become the jailer? In other words, the sheriff's office is no longer really in a policing role for the most part. I mean, I'd venture to say, and I don't know what the numbers are, but it seems from me, looking at it, just from my perspective, seems to me that, 60, maybe 70% of what the sheriff's office does is either jail administration or courthouse administration.
Yeah, that's what it's become. I think we need to have strong leadership that's going to take a more comprehensive approach and also look at the street patrols, because I think that the patrol function is very important. At the end of the day, people want to feel safe. We're a growing county, and we need to make sure that we're maintaining strong public safety for our families, our quality of life, and that's something that's lacking. And when the current sheriff says basically, I may not respond to your burglary call in a timely manner because I had to pull money from patrol to put it into the jail, that's a concern to me because it tells me it's a very limited view of the operation. When you become sheriff, you have to look at everything and make sure you're providing strong leadership, and you have to be leading on issues in terms of how do we manage the jail population that we have, the 9,300 on average that we have, when 70 to 75% are simply awaiting a trial because they can't make bail. We have to have a louder voice in bringing bail reform. And I think
I'm glad you brought that up because that's where I wanted to go.
Okay,
next,
well, let's go there.
I mean, give me my segue.
I teed it up.
You teed it up for me.
But he didn't know. He didn't know.
Well, I mean, he's got the mind reading abilities here is what he's got, but
makes me even more
I
qualified.
know, it makes you even more qualified. Well, I'm not sure. I'm pretty satisfied. But it came out this week that the county has hired yet another law firm, and this time an even bigger law firm, to get into the fray of this bail lawsuit. They've hired Winston Strawn, which I guarantee you is not a cheap law firm. They already have Gardner Wynn, who's charging between $525 and $610 an hour. And I think they've already spent something like $170,000 just in the first, 2 months of the case or whatever, 3 months of the case. And that bill's only going to grow. Now, this lawsuit was brought to try and reform the bail schedule. And we've seen our DA try to implement, kind of this cite and release program, if you will, these first chance programs. I don't see them being all that successful in eliminating the jail population that we've constantly talked about. But the bail reform seems to be the biggest, most efficient way to do this in a quick manner to get it turned around. And yet our county commissioners are fighting this in federal court. And that lawsuit isn't even asking for damages. It's just asking for a quick turnaround to get this bail schedule, reformed. And my question to you is, obviously, I know you said just now you support bail reform. That no doubt in my mind, that's where you stand. What will you do, and what will you tell the county commissioners in terms of getting this done? I mean, instead of spending hundreds of thousands, if not what's going to end up being a 7-figure tab, to defend a case where they're not even defending on damages?
I definitely think the county's on the wrong side of this. I think we definitely need to see how we could be advocates for being part of bail reform. You know, we're fortunate to have the largest county in the state, third largest in the country, and I think that we are in a unique position where we could be leading on these issues, not be leading from behind and being reactive. Again, when a large number of inmates are simply awaiting trial and can't bond out, to me that tells me something's wrong, and we're not using tools that are at our disposal. I'd like to see where legal counsel could be present at the hearing, so we could, that there could be an advocate there. I'd like to see where we could use other models, more PR bonds, personal recognizance bonds. I think it's single digits that are authorized. We got to be careful, though, to make sure that when we're granting those, they don't also become more restrictive.
Sure.
Because that could be, a double-edged sword. But I think these are things we could work through. But again, and this is my experience on city council, is when you're working on an issue like the Sobering Center, you bring up the different stakeholders, find out what the concerns are, how can we minimize the concerns that people have in making this happen, but we make the case with strong numbers. Look, to me, bail reform is important because I'm thinking about the public safety aspect of it too, is these dollars that are being diverted from other areas of public safety are being sucked away from a costly jail system. And I think we could really even ask for the legislature to consider maybe, automatic release or something with certain offenses or minor offenses like first-time offenders, nonviolent, for example, that they automatically, could be released.
How does the sheriff office fit into bail reform, and what role do you see it play?
I think we could use the bully pulpit. I mean, provide leadership and make the argument that at the end of the day, these issues impact my jail population coming in. And what could we be doing on the front end, using pretrial services to make effective decisions, and also, making sure that we understand the impacts that when you're separating families, especially on nonviolent offense, and then people are potentially, pleading to certain things that just to get out of jail where they could be mistreated, where they could be beat. We had somebody earlier this year that was killed by another inmate while awaiting trial on a misdemeanor on camera, and nobody was watching, and the killer was released. I mean, we could do better than that. We could just be a louder advocate on these issues and lead from the front.
Here's the thing. Julio and I sit here week after week with a variety of guests, not just defense attorneys. I mean, we've had law enforcement on here. We've had
experts,
all that, and we've talked about the current event issues and what people are saying, and there seems to be a lot of lip service that people want criminal justice reform. Okay, and everybody is talking about it, but very few people are putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
And what troubles me is you have the county commissioner saying we need to reform our criminal justice system here in Harris County, but then they go off and they approve spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight one of the very things that hundreds of people have said, look, this is the quickest way to ease the problems with our jail. And I just don't get that. I mean, can you shed some light on me being on city council? Like, why people, they know what the solution is, but they want to fight it?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a political calculus. I mean, I think there's always a concern that, yes, it sounds good to say you're for reform because it seems to be the popular thing to say right now. But at the end of the day, sometimes there is that pushback to say, well, what if we release the person and they go and commit another crime, But at the same time is what about all the lives you're impacting on a daily basis with these ineffective policies? That's a wealth-based system. and frankly is being deemed to be unconstitutional based on the argument that's being made, and other cities are doing it. You know, it's not like this is
Right.
necessarily rocket science. Other jurisdictions are using these tools a lot better than what we are, and we need to change that.
Okay, so let's say we have we have reform in bail system, and you have some extra money coming in, and you're able to use some of that money. What do you plan to do with it?
Yeah, well, patrols. I mean, we have a lot of, you know, the rural areas of the county are not what they used to be many years ago. They're thriving areas. There's a lot of activity going on. There's robberies. There's homicides. There's all the big city things that happen in what we sometimes consider inner city. You know, they're experiencing that crime. So we got to make sure that we have adequate police services out there. But what I envision is an opportunity where we take savings and redirect into maybe drug treatment programs that are community-based, mental health treatment that's community-based, because we're very ineffective of dealing with these issues inside the jail system, inside the bureaucracy of the jail. It's too costly. We're not good at it. You know, and so we need to do a better job of addressing those populations because we have a lot of recidivism. The other thing is we need a robust reentry council as well. We don't have that here in Harris County.
What
Travis
is
County
a
has
robust?
Well, we have inmates that leave the county once they've been convicted. Let's say they go into the prison system. At some point, they're going to be released. We're the biggest provider into the state system, so they're going to come back into Harris County with limited opportunity, limited work, housing. You know, families been separated and what have you. So now, within 36 months, 70% are probably going to reoffend again. So it's a perpetual revolving door. And so we also have to make sure we're investing in that process a little bit. But listen, I'm not just about the type that says throw money at a problem. I've done this before. You know, I've helped create the Sobering Center that reduced and saved millions of dollars that we were paying. That money could be reinvested into something else. When I opened Cafe College Houston, that gives young people an opportunity to get on the right path and break that cradle to prison pipeline, it was a collaboration. It wasn't only city dollars. We leveraged city dollars with a community-based organization, Project GRAD, and the municipal court. Instead of just citing individuals or youth for minor offenses, we give them an opportunity to go take a course at Cafe College. It's counselors on duty 6 days a week. So these are potentially breaking the stem of inmates coming into the Harris County Jail. You have to look at it not only in the present, but also who could potentially be coming, and then the reentry side as well, so
Right.
that we stop the flow.
What do you view as being the actual, and because this is something that I think a lot of people don't really understand, but what is the job of sheriff in Harris County?
Well, you touched on it a little bit earlier, is we provide security within the courts. We also manage the jail, and then we have the patrol functions as well, especially in the unincorporated areas of the county, though we're not limited to those areas, but the 2 million plus that live in the unincorporated areas, that's comparable to the city of Houston. And so I would be the chief law enforcement officer, and those would be the primary responsibilities.
There's been talk about taking the jail and separating it from the sheriff's office. Would you support something like that if you were sheriff, or would you want to maintain control over it?
Well, I definitely feel like it brings stronger leadership. One of the failures that I think that we're seeing is that in the current administration, they brought folks that used to work in the Thomas administration to come manage the jail, and we know there were issues back then as well.
Yeah.
And so it just doesn't make sense. We need to bring the best and the brightest minds that have the best experience, people even smarter than I am, to really make this work. So I'm confident that I could bring the right leadership, the right protocols, the right processes, but I'm not opposed to a jail administrator if that's the best result. I know there's some legal issues that need to be looked at. I know even Sheriff Hickman's looked at it, and I think he deemed that it probably wasn't maybe a path forward in that,
Yeah.
so we'd have to look at it again. But I'm not opposed to having an administrator coming in and running the jail, potentially a civilian doing it that has experience, that's a professional in it, and then being a direct report to me. Perhaps that could be a step forward.
Because, you know, I mean, you talk about the Thomas administration, and, you know, Adrian Garcia got in there, and frankly, not much was changed. He came in as part of the Democratic sweep in 2008, and he touted jail reform, and he's going to bring in all sorts of sweeping reforms, and nothing happened. In fact, in some cases, it got worse. I mean, there was still people dying. There was still problems with overcrowding. We never got any meaningful bail reform. I mean, the problems, not only did they not go away, in some cases they got even worse from, Thomas to Garcia, and it's gotten even worse, frankly, under Hickman. I mean, so it seems to be a growing problem, and that's what, I don't know that it's necessarily the person who's in charge of the jail, who's sheriff, so much as this thing has just become too big. Kind of the whole thing about when we talked about the banks, too big to fail. It's almost as if the Harris County Jail has become too big for any one man to reform.
Which is why I ask you, I guess you have two schools of thoughts. Pass it off to maybe an administrator, a civilian, and give up some control, or take it into yourself and whip it into shape. I mean, what do you think, or what are the pros and cons of each? I mean, do you have a plan on how you're going?
I think that we could definitely whip it into shape, if you will. I really believe we could go in there with sound leadership, sound business and management principles. Not to say it's only going to be operated like a jail, because there's certain regulations and standards that we have to meet. But I think we've got to go in there, like I said earlier, by walking around, paying attention to detail, making sure that we're putting the right people in place to lead it, show accountability, transparency from top to bottom. Like what happened with Jenny, the rape victim. Yeah. We look at the DA side of it, but nobody has really been looking at what happened during the 20 plus days that she was in there and she was being mistreated, wasn't given access to a counselor, apparently no mental health kind of outreach.
Most agreed is how they thought she was actually the rapist.
Yes, and so this shouldn't happen. And, I think that we could go in there, and it's more than just saying, well, we're going to develop these policies. You have to make sure they're being followed, upon, and that you're holding people accountable and setting the tone. And I think that it could be done. If it can't be done, then we maybe need to move in the path of an independent jail administrator, or perhaps, again, a direct report, but it doesn't have to be maybe a law enforcement professional, a major that oversees it. It could be a civilian position. We have to be willing to think outside the box. That's what modern day policing requires. It's not the stagnant, the same ideas that were ineffective in the past and bring them back and have them run the jail again. We've got to be forward thinking, what's going to be policing in the 21st century? What does jailing look like? There's a lot of things we have to be doing. There's not a silver bullet that's going to fix everything, but we got to get in there, and I'm an optimist that we could get in there, that I could get in there, bring the right people in place and get it done. This was not a stepping stone for me when I decided to run for this. It's not an easy job to run countywide, but I sincerely feel that I could go in there and make a difference. And I look forward to getting that opportunity if the voters elect me, and I'm going to take that as a very serious charge to go in there and make change happen.
Okay, so the jail is running tight on budget. We have this overtime pay issue, and we have a bunch of spots open. What's causing this problem, and how are you going to fix it?
Well, one of the things that Sheriff Hickman did, I think, was increase the age, for example, of the jail staff to 21. And I think that's created a more difficult situation in terms of hiring people on, because you have a smaller pool. And I think that in theory and in principle, I understand the logic behind it. I do. But you also needed a plan to make sure that you could adequately recruit and staff it. And that goes back to leadership and management. You can't just say, okay, let's change this without knowing what the potential impact could be, the consequence to it. I would maybe reconsider lowering that age again, simply because I think there are positions that maybe a younger person could still man that and attract that broader pool of employees. Look, I mean, we send them off to war, we send them off to do other things. It's just a matter of the recruiting process, and I think that's been botched. And so I think we just have to make sure we're hiring correctly and setting the tone early, and making sure they do have the proper training, and we just have to staff up, and also managing the jail population. I think we have to consider alternatives to incarceration, like the LEAD program in Seattle, when we look at our drug policy, and we simply can't incarcerate our way out of every addiction out there. I think we have to rethink this and have a broader discussion about it.
Are you thinking something like the Sobering Center for drug treatment and rehabilitation?
Potentially, like the LEAD program from Seattle has been studied here, and what the potential impacts and savings, and it would bring hundreds of thousands of savings, if not more.
What is the
and
program?
So it allows for an early intervention up front before incarceration. And so it's a community-based response. I like the idea of the city of Dallas as well, of the prostitution diversion initiative as well, because again, we're simply not dealing with core issues nowadays.
Right.
What my point was earlier, we're dealing with a lot of addictions, a lot of poverty issues. People are simply, struggling and having a steal or whatever. I mean, we've got to rethink how we're approaching crime, because we've gotten away from really being out there fighting crime. See, all these is not being done just to say, well, let's be soft on it. It's on the contrary. It's so we could be tough on crime and truly go after the hard criminals. And we could be tough on crime, but also smart and compassionate at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I heard you talk about, in terms of the legislature acting to help out the bail side of things, but I mean, do you think also that it's time for the legislature to step in and reevaluate our drug laws?
Yes.
I mean, it seems to me that the majority of the people who end up in jail are there for drug offenses and not dealing, not being a drug dealer. It's using, it's possession. It's possession of marijuana, possession of cocaine, possession of heroin, possession of all these controlled substances where really the only person they're hurting is themselves.
That's correct. And I posted something on my social media platforms today where 98% of the arrests in Harris County, not only through the Harris County Sheriff's Office, but all the agencies that feed into the system, 98% come from zip codes that were deemed to be poor zip codes. So we're targeting, it seems, poor neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. So we're really not, we're adding another burden to the situation where incarcerating isn't going to stop them from coming out and using marijuana. They're not overdosing from marijuana. And so we have to rethink how we do this and find more effective models that maybe have a community-based approach, cite and release, other options that are out there to free up that jail space. And again, find community-based approaches, because simply incarcerating, it doesn't work. In this country, we spend $80 billion a year incarcerating people. It doesn't include the judicial side, the police side, $80 billion, and we still have crime in our communities.
Right.
So we have to rethink how we do it, and with limited budgets, if I could ask for more money and do everything, great, maybe we could tackle every issue out there, but we can't. And so that's why we have to rethink our drug policy, and I think that seeing that happen at the state level would be a good thing.
We're getting close to 8:30, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go ahead and open up the phone line. 713-807-1794 is the number if you want to get in on the conversation with Ed Gonzalez. You can also hit us up on Twitter at HCCLA_TV. Ed, one of the big things that you have talked about in your campaign speeches is ending cronyism. Mm-hmm. And it's particularly in the sheriff's office, obviously, but I know that's been a big platform of yours, even going back to your days on city council. Tell us what the problems are and how you plan to address and fix those.
Well, what we're seeing right now, and I think that as I'm out on the campaign trail talking to a lot of people in and out of the Harris County Sheriff's Office, but it's well known or talked about that there's been a lot of movement from Precinct 4 over to the Sheriff's Office, getting sweetheart positions, good days off, nice, bypassing people that have been paying their dues for a long time that are equally, perhaps more talented to do the jobs. And that's not right. I think that we need to be respectful of those that are within the Sheriff's Office that deserve an opportunity to move into some of those positions. And we can't just be taking care of our friends and our buddies in that way. And also, frankly, there's been a lot of talk about campaigning on duty and things like that at taxpayers' expense, and I think we need to stop that. This is a professional organization. We should be leading. We should be leading on policy and everything, and that's what I look forward to bringing to the table.
We got our first phone call coming in. Let's bring on the caller. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt. Hello.
Yeah, I'm a defense attorney here in town. I go to the jail pretty frequently to visit clients, and so my question for Mr. Gonzalez is a little bit personal, and it's probably not by any means the biggest issue that the jail has. But I find that when I go for visits with my clients and when I'm there during family visitation time, that a lot of times the COs, the correctional officers, and the people who are in charge of administering the visits are not very polite. And in fact, they're a little bit rude a lot of times. I can tell a big difference in which jail I go to and which floor in certain jails that I go to, that I sit there and wait for 30, 45 minutes before they come out. I go back over to the window and I ask them, is my client coming out? And I'm rudely treated and told, just sit back down, don't talk to us, they'll come out when they come out. And when I see family members who are there during family visitation times, it's even worse for them. There's signs all over the place that just say, if your children move around too much, or if they go past this little area, your visitation will be canceled altogether. And kids are kids. I'm not sure if you have any kids, Mr. Gonzalez, but kids are kids. And I know you said you're going to walk through the jails and be more present in the jails whenever you become sheriff, hopefully so. But again, this is a minor issue, but it's also about human respect and human dignity. And I wanted to know if this is, number one, something you've been aware of, and number two, if you have any kind of plan for, just creating more courtesy around the jail as far as the COs go. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you for calling in. It's something that is important to me, and I think when you're sheriff, you have to be paying attention to detail. You have to be paying attention to the entire operation. That's why when I'm elected, I'm going to make sure that we have members, defense attorneys sitting on a transition team to be part of the conversation, not only during the transition team, but afterwards as well, to give me feedback on what's working and not working. Visitation, something I'm going to look at. I'm also going to look at the making things easier for you. You're an important part of our criminal justice system. We have to be respectful of that. And too many times it seems adversarial. That should be in the courtroom. Beyond that, we should try to make your job easier when appropriate. I know a lot of things are more digital now, and I think when you go to the county jail now, it's an issue in terms of having access with your clients. Because of some of the limitations there, we've got to see how we could facilitate that process for you. We're a service organization as well. We provide services, and part of that is to try to make sure that we're providing good customer service. It sounds maybe cliche, but it's important. The public expects it. We need to be professionals. Maybe some of the issues have been due to the understaffing, overworked issues, and that's why many people are bailing and leaving. But we need to correct that, and it starts again with a sheriff that's going to set the tone. That's what we expect, and making sure we're fixing some of these things. And I think having members from defense attorneys sitting on transition team and advising me on advisory board beyond that would be helpful to me to know what's going on.
Who do you think are the key players that you need in the city and the county to achieve some of the things that you're talking about? Because some of the things you're talking about, some might argue or say that it's beyond the scope of what the sheriff needs to be involved in. And the office shouldn't be used for anything more than kind of what it is now. Who do you anticipate reaching out to help create your vision, and how do you see that working together?
Well, first, I think when we start from the premise that if we have a limited view of what the role can be, then I think it's just that, it's being limited. I think we have to think more comprehensively to see how can we prevent people, like I mentioned earlier, coming into the system as much as we do, making sure that we're honoring our legal duty and we're not breaching that legal duty when somebody's under our custody and care, and that's fundamental, and so we need to make sure that we're paying attention to that. But I think, look, to me, I have a very collaborative approach, and I think as the sheriff, one of the important powers that I'll be able to have is the power of convening, is being able to bring people together, and that includes working with the DA, It means working with the defense side as well, making sure that we're working with Commissioners Court, that we depend on, as well as with other municipalities like the City of Houston. The City of Houston, Mayor Turner had a transition team focused on criminal justice. And so there's low-hanging fruit right there that we could say, you want it, we want it. How can we work on these issues? How can we maybe talk about having a consolidation of property rooms, for example? We're seeing some of the debacle going on at Precinct 4 right now, and now it's maybe spreading to others as well. Now it's time to have those conversations. So it's about it being a collaborative approach. And look, I'm not naive to think I could fix it all. I've worked in a collaborative body where we had to work Republicans and Democrats to get things done, working with hard, limited budgets, and so I'm not this idealistic person. I'm quite pragmatic, but I understand that if we don't aim higher and try to do more, that it's not just going to happen overnight. And I think that we should be more ambitious. This is the largest county in the state. We could be a leader on these issues and really help create good, strong public policy. But if we just sit back and say, well, that's the way it's always been done, we're not going to get where we need to go.
Who do you think is the biggest sheriff's office ally? Who do you think they could reach out there? And do you think there's someone that, or an agency or entity out there that you think that hey, look, an alliance could be really formed here and we can make some changes? Do you have any ideas on that?
Well, there's a lot of community-based organizations that are already doing a lot of advocacy work. I'm excited for the leadership that Commissioner Ellis will bring to the table, because he's been a strong advocate on these issues. Senator Whitmire on the legislature has been a champion on these issues as well. So it just means us continue. That's why politics have consequences. Local elections matter, because if you get the folks that kind of get this, and a new generation of leadership that's willing to look at our drug laws, willing to bring strong leadership. I may not be able to fix everything, but I could definitely speak and provide, some direction on the way we should be going. And being the sheriff of Harris County, I think, would carry a lot of weight.
Speaking of leadership, you mentioned Precinct 4 earlier.
Yeah.
And it's clearly spreading, I think, to potentially some other precincts as well. But it's clear now that the problem in Precinct 4 goes all the way back to when our current sheriff was the constable out there. I want to get your thoughts on the debacle, and what does that really say about our current sheriff's ability to be a leader?
Well, I think
in criminal justice reform.
Sure, I think it really brings into question that if there was that level of mismanagement potentially going on, can he really handle the job? I frankly think it's been too big for him. I think that he's been in over his head in being able to lead properly. And I think we're seeing the effects of that, where we've had a trail of scandals, we've had less resources for public safety, and we're having a budget deficit now. And so I think that it seriously calls into question his leadership. And then not only that, but some of the same individuals that were involved with that are now part of his management team over at the sheriff's office. So again, going back to, are you really hiring the best and the brightest and really thinking forward? Are you keeping much of the same that may have caused some of these problems potentially? And so it does go back and beyond just what we've heard about the property room mishandling. Is the collection of evidence itself may be an issue that I think may be coming up as well. Were they properly collecting DNA evidence, for example, with the right training and certifications and all this? So I think there's going to be some serious issues that rise from all this that haven't fully come out yet.
You mentioned about a moment ago about maybe having some sort of central evidence collection depository. I don't want to say, can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, it seems that every of the 8 elected constables, they operate their own property rooms. And, given the benefit of the doubt, let's say that most of them operate effectively. But still, I think that we should at least have the conversation to say, is it more effective to have one property room managed by the sheriff's office that has the right standards and protocols in place to make sure we don't have, different policies? Are they being adhered to? We could always audit that one property room, and I think it would be maybe the way to go. And I know that now that's been the talk that circling around the county right now, that perhaps that would be a more effective model.
What's the current relationship between the sheriffs and the precincts? I mean, is it something that's good? Is it not? I mean, do you think you can, getting we talk about the precincts kind of being their own fiefdoms or their own kind of, kingdoms. And do you think you can reach out and extend that olive branch? And what's going on now? Is there even any discussion amongst them? Do you know?
Well, I think you always extend, your hand and the olive branch. And again, I think I've said collaboration quite a bit on the show already. I think that's always the mantra: is go out there, try to work together. It's public safety is a big task. It's difficult for one entity. We're a broad, wide county, and so we got to work together. And when I work together, it's not, hey, we're the big bad sheriff's office, we could do everything. It's how do we work together? There may be some skill sets that they have out there in their constable's office that we could tap into in terms of operations, of collaboration, and vice versa. There's times where we could obviously help. So there's that mutual aid. And so I think that's things we need to be doing, is working with all of them, making sure we're communicating effectively and sharing of resources as well when possible.
We got another call coming in, so let's take it right now. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt. Hi.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking my call. I have a kind of a two-part question. I wanted to ask Mr. Gonzalez what his opinion is of the recent lawsuit that was filed by Equal Justice Under Law by attorneys Alec Caracatanis and Elizabeth Rossi against the jail, and their allegations that approximately 10 people die per year in the jail, and about 6,500 people are incarcerated because they're too poor to pay bail. And wanted to ask what he thinks about that lawsuit and their eyewitness observations that those bail hearings last approximately a minute apiece, and that defendants aren't allowed to speak, and what he proposes to do to fix that process.
Great question. Thanks.
I think we touched on it briefly earlier. I definitely understand, and I do think that we need to change the current wealth-based system that we have. We spoke earlier that I think that we should have counsel present there during that process. I think there's 5 hearing officers that are listening to this and strictly follow the bail schedule. I think we should try to slow things down a little bit to make sure that it's not just, for the sake of expediency that we're moving people through there. So I definitely feel that we should be moving in the direction of where the lawsuit's going, which is how can we, this should be a call to action. This should propel us to really give us that entry, if you will, to try to come up with other reforms that other cities are doing. Potentially you could even schedule people to say, come in and report on weekends. Yeah, well, I mean, if we're willing to think outside the box.
Well, one of the most troubling things that has come out in this whole thing is that one of the proposals was to try a pilot program to put defense attorneys in the bail hearings, and to basically pay defense attorneys to be there and be on standby. And the grant or the proposal within the budget was significantly less than the money that's already been spent defending the lawsuit.
Yes.
And it was going to be a 12-month program to staff to see how this goes. And instead of doing that, they decided to spend almost $200,000 defending the suit.
That's why I think we've gone in the wrong direction with it. I would have used it as an opportunity to really use it as a calling call, I guess, to really push reform in the positive direction too.
I mean, I go back. This is my biggest problem: is that everybody sits here and they talk about criminal justice reform, and their actions don't match their words. And I don't know. I mean, I don't want, if you do get elected sheriff, I mean, I don't want to be having the same conversation with you a year from now or 2 years from now, and say, Sheriff Gonzalez, if that's your title at that point, what the hell happened? What,
Well, first, I like the ring to that. but look, one of the things that I tout is I've been a proven reformer already. I consider the Sobering Center to be a meaningful reform. I consider some of the other public policy that I did where I codified into the city budget the Chronic Consumer Stabilization Initiative, which pairs a police officer with a mental health profession, and how do we stabilize those with mental illness. It was a pilot program. I didn't create it, but I helped get it into the city budget to make it, and it's still operating. And so I've come up with a number of, I helped create the city's first group homes ordinance. That's my policy that I helped pass, I helped draft to help deal with those with mental illness, those that are being targeted in the community, like seniors out in the community. I create the first ordinance here in our city. So I've done these things. I'm not just saying we need these things and please elect me, and then once I'm there, I'm not going to pursue it. This is my passion. This is what I've been working. I've been to reentry meetings in these other cities that I mentioned, and I'm going to bring that kind of philosophy, that kind of passion to the job and competence to the job that we haven't seen.
Let's grab another phone call here for Ed Gonzalez on Reasonable Doubt. If you want to call in, 713-807-1794. Hello, thanks for calling.
Yeah, thanks. I think the question may have been answered during the time I was on hold about mental illness, and I just wanted to, to review it one more time. Maybe Ed didn't address additional resources and where he would go for the money, because I don't think there's, like a penny left in the budget for any kind of new initiative for mental illness. And if a third of the people are in the jail because of some mental illness, there's got to be like a home or a hospital setting to deal with this. And it's a question of, if it's a question of money, a question of budget, it can't be that much more to put these people in an institution designed to treat their illness. It probably would be the same as what is paid in the jail right now, per diem. If it's a little more, then why not make a different facility for these people altogether? That's my question.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I've worked on these issues on city council. Part of the impetus for the Sobering Center was to find a different approach of how we deal with people dealing with addiction in their life. Mental illness is a big piece as well, and it's going to continue to be a growing issue in our community with PTSD and other things. So we've got to really think more, be more innovative in this area. Look at other models of what's being done. Miami-Dade County, I think, has a model we could look at where it's not simply incarceration. What I mentioned earlier about alternatives to incarceration before they ever get into the system, how we could maybe divert into more evidence-based models that work out in the community. And you're right. I try to be very careful, and I think because I've worked under city council and tight budgets, that I'm practical to think everything has a dollar to it, assigned to it. And so if you're going to propose something, you got to make sure you know that you're going to pay for it. And so to me, what I see is the potential cost savings that we can reach by properly managing jail population, which it's a struggle in itself. It's going to be a monumental task. But if we could achieve that, savings that we find from the daily incarceration rates and the bureaucracy that we operate could be diverted into potentially grant-type programs that we could collaborate with entities that deal with addictions, that deal with mental illness, to properly treat that in the community. Because there's effective programs that work out in the community, Senacor and many others, but they simply always lack the funding. So if we could try to be part of that process and also create a system where you don't necessarily place them in a jail setting like we talked about, then we could find a more humane and more effective way to deal with it. Because it's very costly when you're talking about medications, the mistreatment that goes on even to this day inside the mental health area at the jail. And so we've got to change it. So part of it would be to find cost savings by alternatives to incarceration, and then redirecting that to programs that provide street patrols, mental health programs, if those are more effective, partnering with the MHMRAs and others to deliver some of these services, and we provide some grants.
Yeah. Ed, I want to get your thoughts on police-community relations. In the last week, we've seen 2 more shootings that have resulted in the deaths of 2 black males, both handled in very different ways. The one in Tulsa, they released the videos almost immediately. The officer was charged almost immediately, and there seemed to be very much a transparent process in Tulsa. Charlotte, the complete opposite. We don't see a video released. We see riots. The videos that we do get released starts with cell phone videos. That sparks finally, after days of not releasing the video, we do get an official video. And then either yesterday or the day before, I can't remember because the days are kind of running together for me a little bit. But we find out that the officer involved in Charlotte didn't even turn on his body cam. And there's a whole plethora of issues to talk about with that, but I kind of want to start at a 30,000-foot view of this, because you were a street officer with HPD. You know what it's like to be out there. What is your view of what needs to change in terms of police-community relations and the problems we seem to be having, or the perceived problems we're having, with an inordinate number of black males being shot and killed by police officers?
Yeah, it's very troubling. It's concerning. I mean, obviously, anytime there's a loss of life, it's impacting somebody, families, communities, and we're seeing the riots, and we've seen also officers being targeted and attacked. So I think we need strong leadership in this area, and I think it starts by working with communities, making sure we're trying to make them part of the solution, making sure we're listening as well. As a city councilman, you learn to listen to constituents and really address their concerns. And so I think that's something I would bring to the table as well. But it's very concerning to me, and I think we should be just shocked to know that here in the sheriff's office, we've yet to roll out a full body camera program. And something could happen here, and the first thing anyone's going to ask is, well, we'd like to see the body camera, the footage. Well, there's none. It's not being rolled out. It started with a pilot program back when Sheriff Garcia started, with money that I think that received from District Attorney Anderson.
Yeah.
Yes, and it hasn't grown. So what's been happening these last 15 months, and I understand, well, we're going to work on it and it's coming. We should already be, the City of Houston rolled out their program. I was part of that city council that did it. We have to be ahead of it. It seems like we're backwards, and if something major were to happen right now, that's the first thing it's going to ask, and people are going to want to see some footage, even if it might not be the best footage, but that's almost expected now, and we don't have that. And we need transparency and accountability. Yes, we have to protect the legal process, make sure that the officers have due process if there's a controversial shooting, but we have to balance that with the demand now that people want transparency and accountability, and making sure that there's not going to be any kind of cover-up, and it's a tough job. Sometimes I look at it through the lens of an investigator, so I understand that there's a lot of different ways to look at that footage, but at the end of the day, we need to bring more sunshine into the process, if you will, where we need to just put the cards on the table. Show, like you said, sometimes when you do that, it provides more public trust, where they feel that, okay, it's being handled correctly. And I think at the end of the day, that's what people want to see. And we need more de-escalation training, more role-playing training.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean,
yeah.
Do you think that policing has become too aggressive? I mean, we've seen the rise in tactical vehicles and SWAT teams, and kind of this, we've called it the militarization of the police. How do you de-escalate from that?
Well, I think we have to start rolling some of that back. I think we are seeing a great deal of militarization, and I think it's not always warranted. I think that we're also seeing a lot of, we've seen these, active shooter situations where a lot of suspects are going to be heavily armed as well. So we got to make sure we're balancing the protection of the officers as well. But I think that we need more de-escalation, where it's not strictly escalating to a deadly force situation. One of the benefits of having received the highly specialized training with the hostage team is that's exactly what we learned. We have active threat before us, and part of it is how do we de-escalate through a number of tools. And I know these interactions, these violent interactions between, in a deadly force situation, happen in a matter of seconds and in close proximity, so there's not a time to establish a perimeter and call SWAT and all of that. But I think that initial thought of how can I de-escalate this instead of automatically going to deadly force or fearing the individual that's before me. And I think we also need to see additional diversity within the ranks. I think we need to try to see how we could find officers, or in this case deputies, that could live in communities that they also maybe not directly patrol that particular neighborhood, but that don't at the end of the shift go and travel to the extreme limits of the county, far away from the areas they patrol, and maybe there's a disconnect there. I know we're trying to look at that within the City of Houston. There's arguments whether it's effective or not, but I think it always helps if you have an understanding of the community you're patrolling.
Well, Mr. Gonzalez, what makes you different than the sheriffs from the past, and specifically from Sheriff Hickman now? What makes you different? What makes you different than him?
Yeah, well, I think that I bring a new approach. For me, it's an approach about the future, understanding and seeing the reality that we need reform. I know it's been talked about for a long time, but I don't know of anybody that could come here and say, no, the system's working good. I think that tell me any area of the sheriff's office that's top of the line, that's effective, that's a model for the rest of the country or the world. I would argue that we don't really have that. And why not? We're the third largest, the largest in the state. You know, we should be leading on these issues, and we're not. And so I've brought proven reforms under my belt that I've led, that I've helped manage, that I've helped launch, so I can make that happen. You know, I've sat as Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Houston, where I oversaw or helped oversee, a major government operation as well, and did that effectively. And so I know that I could bring the kind of leadership, the right balance. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Houston in criminal justice, University of Houston downtown. I have a master's degree from the University of St. Thomas that gave me some of that social justice perspective. The background that I explained earlier in law enforcement, and then the efforts that I had on city council, where even in my own city council budget, always ended up with a surplus, make sure it went back to the general fund. So I manage my own budget effectively, and so I bring that unique skill set. It's not just leading an operation. I think I bring an outside perspective as well.
I was going to ask you, do you consider yourself an outsider coming in?
I do, because I haven't been, I'm not part of that, what's sometimes deemed to be the good old boy system, operating within the same system, if you will. And we've seen what that kind of experience brings. Like I said, that's what we have right now. And what has it led us to? A lot of experience in the county system has brought us, less resources to fight crime in the communities. It's brought us a budget deficit, and it's brought us a trail of scandals, and so we need a fresh set of eyes that's going to come in, that can work collaboratively with others, and is an innovator, willing to think outside the box and willing to have these discussions.
Ed Gonzalez, I appreciate you coming on this program.
Thank you.
Tonight, I wish you the best of luck in November, and the next month is going to be quite exhilarating for you. But that's all the time we have with Ed, ladies and gentlemen. Before we leave tonight, it's a sad day for our show. In 1998, this show started with Dan Gerson. He brought Reasonable Doubt to the airwaves back then, and it's been going ever since then. Last week, unfortunately, we lost Dan Gerson. Julio and I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for the vision that Dan had to bring this program to people. He believed that we could help spread the word about the criminal justice system, that people would watch this program to learn about Harris County's criminal justice system, that prosecutors and judges would watch it, that defense attorneys would watch it, and that the general public would watch it. Dan Gerson was a Renaissance man, if there ever was one. He was a brilliant lawyer, a brilliant father, a brilliant husband, and just an overall great guy. And the defense bar has really, truly lost a giant. And as much as we miss him, I know his family misses him even more. So we want to dedicate this episode to Dan Gerson, and we'll see you next week, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.